Let me share my screen. We're here, share. Okay, so do you see LA InDesign user group
Yes.
Yes.
on the screen? Okay, good. So today we're going to be talking about interactivity, and this is a two-part meeting for I think most people know that we're going to be talking about interactivity in InDesign as straight out of the box, what you can do with InDesign as Adobe wrote it. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about taking interactivity to the next level with IN5, an add-on that our presenter today, Justin Putney, wrote. And that is tomorrow, same time, same place. It's also free. If you haven't registered for it, you can. And one of the cool things about tomorrow is that somebody is going to win IN5 for a year, $360 prize. So here's our presenter. Our host should be two other people, but it looks like it's just me today. Here's our advisory board. Angie, the newest member of our advisory board and person who is working on our new website, she is here. And this is all brought to you by the generous support of Adobe, Marksware, Extensis, Text Expander, InMotion, Mighty Deals, and Ajar Productions, plus people like you. And people like you are important because there are donations. As you probably know, you can attend the meetings for free, or you can do a donation. Those who can do the donation, that's great. If you can't, just attend free, that's fine. That's part of what the people who can do the donations allow to happen. But the donations allow us to pay for our Zoom bill and MailChimp bill and stuff like that. We have the usual social media places, although they're not really updated as often as we should. We have these raffle prizes after the meeting. And there are these rules. You must be present to win. We'll go over these rules again after the presentation. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Justin, and we're going to talk about adding interactivity to InDesign documents, session 1.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. I'm going to start sharing my screen right away. Well, as Alan mentioned, we are going to be spending 2 days on this. And the first day is going to be dedicated just to interactivity specific to InDesign that can be exported from InDesign. So we're going to look at some live examples. We're going to do things like create a table of contents, look at adding some video, creating some animation, adding buttons, of course, controlling things with buttons. And we're going to look at multi-state objects, which if you haven't used in InDesign, is one of the most powerful interactive tools that InDesign has. All these things in this list are native InDesign capabilities. And just to let you know what we're looking at for day 2, we're going to look at things that are specific to In5. So In5 is, as Alan mentioned, it's an add-on that I've created. It lives in InDesign once it's installed, and it supports all the things we're covering today, but then we'll also be looking at additional things that it does, like creating flipbook animation. It makes it easier to make pop-ups, which are one of the things we're going to look at creating with multi-state objects. And we're gonna create 3D flip cards, slideshows, swipeable image sequences, and we'll look at actually creating responsive designs using InDesign and In5. And then we'll talk about how you can host the content, share it. What are your options for getting your content to the outside world? And I say content because when we start talking about this stuff, there's so many different things that you can create. Some of them are going to be ebooks and digital magazines. Other things can actually be websites or mobile applications. So there's a whole lot of stuff, and so I use the generic term of content when I'm referring to that. So today, specifically, we'll look at the 3 different interactive formats that we're going to cover over these 2 days, and we'll compare them over the course of the 2 days. And start with the live examples, then we'll actually be building and previewing the content in InDesign, and then we'll have a Q&A. And if you have questions that come up along the way, you can feel free to put them in the chat. I was just checking to see if there is a question pod. I'm not sure if there is, but wherever you have the ability to put questions, I think it's just the chat. You can put them in there, and Alan, if you're monitoring those and you feel like it's relevant to what's going on and you want to interject, I'm totally fine with that. It will not break my concentration in any way. So I'm happy to answer questions as we're going along, but I'm also going to leave time at the end so we can dig into stuff there.
Justin, David, can I ask you to monitor the chat for questions? David, you might be muted. No, anyway, okay, go ahead, Justin.
All right. Okay, so the formats we're going to look at today are publish online and fixed layout ePub. Those are 2 things that you can export directly from InDesign. They come built into InDesign, current version and several of the previous versions. And there's nothing extra you need to do. And we'll take a look at what goes into that and what you can do with those output options, some of the pros and cons of each of them, and we'll actually create the interactivity that can work in those. And then day 2, we'll be looking exclusively at In5, which is again my commercial add-on that does the stuff we're going to do today, plus it does additional things. And so we'll be focused on that in day 2. But today is the broader interactive stuff that is going to work in all 3 of these formats. And just want to note, this is something I've learned over time. Talking about these formats is just because you hear the words HTML doesn't mean you're going to have to do any coding. So everything we're covering in these 2 days are no coding options. These are things you build in InDesign, and something else takes care of the coding for you. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about publish online, fixed layout ePub, and In5 as output formats. So I just want to take a moment and talk about why we're not talking about interactive PDF. And you can see kind of at a glance the reason from this slide. It's basically that interactive PDF doesn't support interactive stuff. Once upon a time, interactive PDF did support video. It did not support InDesign's native animation, which you'll see is super easy to create. It doesn't support animated GIFs, doesn't support multi-state objects, which, as I said, is one of the core super important building blocks of creating all kinds of interactivity in InDesign. It doesn't support embedding other content, not HTML anyway, and nothing right now. But I mean, the thing I'm sort of like hinting at is at one time it supported Flash, but that's precisely the problem, that all the stuff that did work, the video and audio, and if you wanted to import outside animation, it could be Flash. This was all based on the Flash player, and it was tucked in under the hood. So when you installed Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Reader, it automatically had the Flash player built inside of it. And so you and your clients and your audience, the people you're sending your PDF documents to, they didn't even know that they were using Flash inside of there. And now Flash is completely dead. And aside from that, with all the mobile devices, we have hundreds of different PDF readers. So it's really not just Adobe on the market. So the reliability of creating anything interactive in a PDF is pretty nil, because you don't know what the person on the other side of the screen is opening your PDF in. And so, that's why we're going to focus on these three formats: publish online, fixed layout, ePub, and In5 over the course of the day. There is one note on here. We're going to look at scrollable frames, and that's supported with a free add-on that that I make. You can find it at ajar.pro/scroll, and that will let you make scrolling frames in publish online, fixed layout, ePub, and In5. But you need that add-on to be able to do that in these formats. So starting off with publish online, if you don't know what publish online is, we're going to look at it in a minute, and it's built into InDesign. It was introduced, I believe, around CC 2014. It hasn't really changed since it's been there. It was introduced as a technology preview, and one of the main things about it is that it is super easy to export. It doesn't have a lot of options. So, I mean, that is both a pro and con. There's really not a lot to figure out. It's push button and go. And what it does is take your document, export it as a digital format, and upload it directly to Adobe servers, and then gives you a link that you can use to view it or share it with other people. And so you don't have to do any of this stuff yourself. It's very, very easy. On the flip side of that, it's only on Adobe servers. You can't host it on your own server. You can't reappropriate the content in any way, because it lives on Adobe servers. You can't, for instance, like take the content and make it into a kiosk app or something like that. It just lives in that one place. So also with that, it's a private link. And there's no, because it's a private link, there's no search indexing. The text isn't live, so even if Google was looking at it, they wouldn't necessarily be able to see anything. So it's not SEO friendly. It's not going to be discovered by anybody. You have to be actively sharing the link. For some people, that's positive. And then maybe the flip side I didn't put on here is also you can't like password protect it, right? So it's out of the box, which makes it really easy. If you just need what's inside that box, it's super easy. But if you want to go outside that box, that's where you run into issues. So that's really publish online in a nutshell. And we're gonna look at how easy it is and what it looks like momentarily when we look at the live examples. But first, let's talk about the fixed layout ePub format. This is a little bit different. It's from the export menu in InDesign, and it's actually going to create a package file. It's a little bit more complicated in terms of the export dialog, but still pretty darn easy. It's taking care of most everything for you. And the nice thing is, because it's a package and there are existing marketplaces, like Apple has a marketplace where you can sell ebooks. It's a super easy kind of startup selling one-off ebooks, because you just you just sign up for the licensing that you need to do with Apple. The export is built into InDesign, and you upload the file, you put a price on it, and it lives in their store. So it's really great in terms of that. One of the challenges is that not all of the reader applications work the same. And so you're going to find some things look right in one reader and not on another. So that's been a challenge that people have consistently run into with fixed layout ePub. I will say fixed layout ePub is as opposed to reflowable ePub. So what we're talking about with all of these options is trying to maintain the layout that you created in InDesign, and also trying to maintain the interactivity that you created in InDesign. A reflowable ePub is the kind of thing that you would see on on one of like a text-only kind of e-reader, where you can change the font size and it reflows and all that, and it doesn't really have page breaks. But for the most part, when people are creating InDesign interactivity, they want their layout to come with it. And so one of the other things about this is that you are somewhat limited by this format. It is HTML under the hood, so it can be cracked open. It's really just a zipped file with an ePub file extension. You can crack it open and try and repurpose it, but it's really not meant to be repurposed. So that will contrast a little bit with some of the other examples you see. All right, so let's take a look at the live examples and some InDesign demos. So you may notice I'm in my browser. This is actually made with In5, this presentation. So it does do presentation specific features. And I'm not going to talk about them much over these 2 days, but I do want to mention it because beforehand, somebody was talking about Saros, and I know that's sort of a presentation specific tool. So here's some of that stuff, and I try to use eat my own dog food, so to speak, and use In5 as I'm presenting as well. So example 1 is the presentation itself. Some of the additional examples, most of these first ones are In5 because that's what I collect in terms of examples. But these are all examples of interactivity that people created with InDesign. And this one I love showing because this is just super creative animation. It's one of my favorite animation examples. And this person is really using the visual design to determine the paths of the animation and how things appear on screen. And this animation in the example document that we're going to look at is something that I tried to recreate. And so I think it's kind of an interesting thing to look at in terms of, how do you go beyond basic animation in InDesign? We'll take a look at that a little bit later on. This is an example 2 years later of the same person making an annual report. And I just wanted to show you the flexibility of format. So when I talk about having a constrained format, it's this person, when they exported this one, chose a different option. And now this is a flipbook. All right, so this is a feature of In5 where they just exported it with a different page format, and now it looks different. So that's the kind of thing you can get from a really flexible format. This one is a great example of multi-state objects. So one of the things we're going to look at in the example document is how you can create a pop-up with a multi-state object. And some of the most useful things you create with a multi-state object, which if you hear me say MSO, I'm referring to a multi-state object. It revolves around creating what I call an empty state. So a state that has no visible content, and then changing that state, and so you suddenly see the content. And so that's what you're getting with this pop-up here, is you have information that's on screen, and you can close it, and that multi-state object goes to the empty state, and suddenly it's no longer visible. And then inside of here, I'm going to roll over, and when I click, this is another multi-state object that has gone from its empty state to a visible state. And then it's got multiple states within it that I'm able to navigate with these buttons. And inside of that state, there's interactivity. And this is all InDesign created stuff. This is another one of my favorites. I love this opening animation. And here's another great example of a pop-up. And I always do the engineer track because when you click the button, the rocket takes off. And another great thing about this one is the navigation. So again, speaking about a flexible format, the fact that they have no external navigation, so they're able to direct the learner based on their navigation. So they've created in a series of steps. And when you get to the last step, that's only when you see the next option. And same here, this goes in order and you go all the way through. And you also have the ability to navigate from up here. So, you know, there's a lot of your ingenuity as a designer that you can apply if you basically can create animation buttons and multi-state objects in InDesign to create about just about any type of interactivity that you can imagine. Just as contrast in terms of format, this is a college alumni magazine, and so you can see this looks very different. And this one is a little bit more like a web page, although I'll have some more examples coming out soon that are 100% looking like a web page, all created in InDesign. This uses Google Fonts, so they've got these web license fonts and live text on here, so this is all selectable. And you know, they just spent some extra time and really made a very polished layout. This is more of a digital magazine look. And so again, just this idea that there's a huge variety in terms of, this is why I'm using that word content, is there's so many different things you can create, so many different looks, and it's really just up to your creativity at that point. So this is the document we're going to be working on over these 2 days. This is the Publish Online version. So you can see what is specific to Publish Online when we click that button. It has this viewer bar down here. It's got thumbnails, and you can zoom in, you can zoom out. There's a full screen option, a sharing option, and you can change the language, but I think it changes the language of the menu. I don't think it, you know, puts a bunch of languages into your document, because these are actually rendered as images. And as such, I'm going to be talking about creating a table of contents. And first thing I have to do is apologize, because I really expected this to work in Publish Online. The table of contents is here, but I can't click on any of them. And I don't know why that is. I thought that was supported, but I'm not sure if it is. So I'll give you a look at the document. Here's the scrolling frame. So this was made with that free add-on that I mentioned. And you can see there is scrolling text. Here's what a video looks like in here. This is a video that was placed in InDesign. So I click the play button and then you can see it. And unfortunately, I don't know if this was always the case, but they used to, I think that they supported the poster image, but I noticed in both the Publish Online and the fixed layout formats, you get that kind of awkward looking like controller with the film strip icon. And so, but there would be a workaround to that. Certainly you could put an image here yourself on top of the video and, you know, make a big play button. And when you click it, you could have it hide itself and play the video, we'll take a look at adding those types of actions to buttons in the InDesign document. So that might just be something to consider as a workaround. Here's a menu. This is a multi-state object option. We'll probably get into making this kind of complex thing tomorrow, because In5 comes with a tool that makes this really easy. But under the hood, this is just a multi-state object with buttons. So there's an empty state and there's a menu state. And when I click the menu, it just says next state. So it toggles between those. Here's some simple animation. It's triggered on page load, but it can also be replayed or triggered initially from a button. Here's some more complex animation. This is the one where I'm attempting to recreate this animation from the annual report. And you can judge my success for yourself. It's not quite as pretty as what the designer made. And here's another example of multi-state objects. So each one of these then also triggers an animation within the state, which is another cool thing you can do. These are 3D flip cards. These will not work here, but you'll see them when we look at them tomorrow with In5. This normally has a slideshow. Only the opening animation works because that is, well, it's now an In5 specific feature, but it was once a DPS feature for anybody who remembers the Adobe Digital Publishing Suite / solution. This is another example of a pop-up. So it can have, different pop-ups on the same screen. And this is nonlinear navigation example, super simplistic one. But just to show you the idea is I click on the first one, it takes me down this path that's related to the first button that I clicked. Whereas I could click a different one and it takes me down a different path. These two paths could look identical. I've made them red and blue so you can see the difference. But you really have a lot of opportunity when you're designing for digital. It's not like print where you have to have everything on screen all at once. You can selectively show things to people, which is much more caring of their attention. And you can tailor the information to their responses to things they click on. And that's obviously going to be more compelling for them if they're seeing information that's most relevant for them. And I think I just have one more page, and this one is an In5 specific one as well. So this is just to show you the entire document. Let's look at it in iBooks as well. This is the ePub version. This is loaded into iBooks, which does a pretty good job of displaying everything. You can see, I hope you can see my cursor. I'm getting the pointy finger, which means these items in the table of contents are actually linked up. So I should be able to click on them, but that's also not working for some reason, which is completely mysterious to me. The scrolling frame is working. The menu doesn't seem to work, and I think it might be it's just the positioning. So if you're designing for an ePub, this might be a quirk that you need to be aware of, is that if you click near the bottom corner of the screen, you might be triggering the page animation. But you can see the same thing with the video here. It's got this icon and the play button, and then it shows the video. And I genuinely don't know why it's doing that. There we go. Yeah, but it could be, I think it's just related. They've been making video changes in InDesign as they've been removing Flash related things. In some cases, they cut out a little more than they needed to, and we're waiting for them to add some of it back in. Again, these 3D flip cards aren't going to work in this format, and slideshow. So, I mean, these look basically identical. They function identically because they're both made by the InDesign team. And it's really between the two of them, the way you choose is what is your purpose and who's your audience. If you're going to make an ebook that you're going to try and sell, well, then the ePub is a better way to do it. If you're sharing something for review, which I think is an absolute fantastic way to use publish online, because it's this Adobe link and it has this sort of temporary nature to it, and you can do it in a split second. Then maybe that's a better format. So, and it's just universally shareable because it's a URL and you can send that to anybody by way of email. And then, tomorrow we're going to look at In5. This one, yeah, I'd be really embarrassed if the table of contents didn't work in this one. Scrolling frame, and of course the menu. And this one, the video actually has the poster image, and it's got more settings. So for instance, I set this one up so you can't see the controller. So that might be something we take a look at tomorrow, the fact that you can control that kind of stuff. Animation. And you might notice I'm just viewing this from my desktop. So these files live on my computer. I just exported them and opened it in the web browser. If I were going to share it with other people, then I would actually have to upload it to a web server. There's a few other ways to do it, but that's kind of the straightforward, a clear way to do it. And there's our animation. And then I'll just show you I'm going to skip through some of this little stuff you've seen and just show you what the other things are supposed to look like. So here are the 3D flip cards. Here's the animation that then has slideshows. Each one of these is a separate slideshow. They're a little bit offset. You've seen that one over and over. And this one is an image sequence, and I can swipe, and it creates the illusion that I'm animating it by moving my hand or my mouse around it. One other thing that I want to show you before we move on to a different page. Let me see, I want to pick one that looks really different. How about this one? Is that this one is responsive. And this is, again, what we're going to look at tomorrow is as I shrink the size of the browser. Now I'm in portrait mode, and it is showing this other layout, which I created in InDesign. And I can completely change the appearance here if I want to. And sorry that you're seeing code in this background. I promised no coding. All right, so those are the documents we're going to be working with. That is the document we're going to be working with. Those are the 3 different formats, the 2 for today and 1 for tomorrow. Let's dive into InDesign now and actually look at how we create these elements. All right, so again, just to be very clear, everything I am creating today, I'm doing in InDesign. There's nothing that requires an add-on other than the scrolling frame. And all of the options that I'm going to show, all of the panels today, except for the scrolling frame, are InDesign panels. So you may not have known they existed, but up in the window menu under interactive, there's a whole bunch of interactive stuff. And it's been there since like CS5. And so, you may not have even realized it, but all this is in here, and it is among some of the best interactive tools in terms of ease of use. At least certainly the animation of the buttons. Multi-state objects, admittedly, are a little bit, can be a little clunky to work with because I've seen people create super complex things. And if you're working with somebody else's file, it's a little hard to track down their object states. But it's very powerful. So that's the trade-off. So let's start off on the first page. This is my table of contents. And I think what I'm going to do is just select everything in here and delete it. And just for anyone who hasn't made a table of contents before, I'll create it more or less from scratch. So to do that, I have my text cursor inserted in the text frame. And I'm going to go up to layout and choose table of contents. Now the basics of this panel are that I can give it a title. I assign a paragraph style to that title, so that gets placed. And then I can tell the table of contents what paragraph style I want to use for making these items. So if here, let me go ahead and cancel, and I'll just show you on each of these screens. I have this heading at the top, and each one of them is styled with section title. So when I go in to create my table of contents, I'm telling this dialog to create it from section title. And I did that by finding it in the list here and clicking add. So then it appears over here. And I can choose a style. And so I have a separate style created for the table of contents. And that way it doesn't put this massive headline in there. And I tell it to create PDF bookmarks. And in this case, I'm going to have it replace the existing table of contents. So pretty simple. I click OK. And here we go. There's the table of contents. And I just realized I want to make a change. Let me go in and say, I don't actually want page numbers. So I'll click more options and I'll say no page number, because who cares about pages in a digital document? So I'll click OK and it's updated. So now I've just got all my pages listed in there. And if I create a new page, then that'll work too. I'll just have to go in, select this item, and go to update table of contents. So we may do that in a little bit. Now the next page has the scrolling frame on it. And I want to show you how that is set up. This is the one thing that requires an extra tool. So I'm going to double click in here and then hit escape. And you can see that the actual text frame is huge. It exceeds the page. So I'm going to hit Command X and then Command V. And you can just see I have this text frame. And what I've done is created a blank frame. I can do that again from scratch, just using the rectangular frame tool. And I'll draw that in here. And then I want to select the text frame. And again, I'm going to cut this from the place it's in. And then I'll select the container. And I'll choose Edit, Paste Into. This is very important. This is the step that makes this work. If you choose any other paste option, it does not work. So paste into, and then I want to take this content and actually move it down so it's sitting, the top is sitting down inside. That's another thing you need to do to make sure this works correctly. Now, if you have In5 installed, you'll find this in the In5 menu. And again, we're going to look at all this tomorrow. But if you don't have that installed and you just have the scrolling frames installed, you'll find it under Window Universal Scrolling Frames once you've installed it. And this is really simple. With this selected, it recognizes that I've got an object that has a container that has something pasted into it. It gives me these options. If I weren't selecting a frame that actually had that in it, it would give me instructions. But when I have this selected, I have this option, and I can choose auto detect or vertical. In this case, I know it's vertical, so I'm just going to do that. And that's how we get that scrolling frame in the output. And again, that works on all three formats that we're talking about: fixed layout ePub, publish online, and In5. Let's keep rolling. Take a look at what it takes to add a movie. So I'm just going to take this movie that's in here, and I'm going to hit the delete key. And then I will go to File, Place, And let me just go into my links and grab the one that I've been using. So this is an MP4 file. It's, for anyone who's at all interested, it's H.264 encoded. And all that means is it's like the universal standard on the web now. So basically all of your videos should be using that anyway. And when you place that in there and export it with any of these formats, it's going to work basically everywhere because everybody supports this at this point. With that video in there, I can then go to the media panel, which again, all these things, basically all these things that I'm going to show can be found under Window Interactive. So there is the media panel. And you can set a poster frame. You see it has a poster frame set. I'm not sure why that isn't working in the two InDesign formats, but I can say with confidence it will work in In5. You can have this on page load, though I would say if you're doing this in Publish Online, you might run into browser restrictions, particularly if you do this on the first page. So there is a security implementation in Chrome and Safari. They basically don't like media with sound autoplaying, which I'm grateful to. But what they expect is that a user interacts with your page before you have media playing. So that's just something to think about if you've checked this play on page load and it's not working for you. There's the ability to add navigation points. These you can then use buttons to jump to specific navigation points. Some of that was slightly broken, and I do believe it's being fixed. If you're, say, exporting with In5, I think if you export with these other formats, I think it works. But that's kind of an esoteric thing that I know not a lot of people use. While I'm here and we're talking about video, because I don't know how much we're going to get into it tomorrow, I did mention the other options. They're just under In5 interactive widgets, and you can see there's a bunch of other options. Because I mentioned autoplay, this additional option gives you the ability to mute the video. So if you have a background video that you want to autoplay and you want to bypass that web browser restriction I was talking about, it's there. There's a bunch of other cool stuff in here in terms of, like here I have the controller set to none, but I could have a big play button, or I could have the full controller. All that stuff has been removed from InDesign because, again, was taken out when they're like, oh, this is Flash related. Well, okay, but it's preserved in here for In5 if you're creating that kind of content. And then there's an ability to trigger an end action. So if you want to go to the next page or trigger an object state, right? The multi-state object, the versatility I'm talking about, which we're going to see a little bit, you can trigger that with the end of the video. So I just want to mention those while we're covering video, that's where those other options are found. That's basically all there is to video. All I did was place an MP4 file. The options in the media panel are not very complicated, as you can see. So it's all pretty standard. Let's take a look at creating some animation. These are my three buttons, or my three animated items. And I've got them all animated right now. Let me just strip all that out. The animation panel, just like everything else we've been talking about, is under Window Interactive. And this is just one of my favorite InDesign tools because it makes animation so easy. There's no timeline that you need to work with. You basically just choose a preset and go. So in this case, I'm going to choose, let's say, let's just do fade in. It's nice and simple. And what this has automatically done, it set this animation on all three of those. I have them selected, and it knows the order based on my layout order. But let's check and make sure that it's animated them from top to bottom the way that I wanted it to. So I'm opening the ePub Interactivity preview. This is how I can preview animation in here. and other items. Oh, and it's actually got them in reverse, which is just fine because that gives us an excuse to look at the timing panel. So if you want to control the order of how your animations appear, there is this nifty timing panel. And one thing that I did when I created these, which I highly recommend you doing when you're creating things, interactive elements in InDesign, is to give them a name that you can recognize. So I did that in the animation panel previously. So this is check 1, this is check 2, and the bottom one is check 3. So by giving these a name, they have specific names that I recognize in the timing panel and in the buttons panel. So instead of saying rectangle, 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 and saying, oh, I wonder which one of these is rectangle number 3, I can name them and actually recognize them quite quickly. Now, if I didn't happen to do that, if I double click, it will select the object on the page. So that's useful to know too. So in wanting to reverse these, all I have to do is drag the order of appearance in the timing panel. Then almost all these interactive panels have a preview button. So I click there and it automatically opens the ePub interactivity preview for me. And in order to see it, because these by default, they all have on page load animations. So you can tether your animations to different events, and by default it's on page load. So that's part of what makes this so easy. Is a lot of the animations I'm creating, I just want them to work on when the page shows up. And so that's the default. So again, that's part of the ease of using it. Now, in order to refresh the page and see my animation, I have to click the play button in the preview, and I'll reload it. And I can see they're playing in the right order now. So in the animation panel, if you want to see what events are triggering your animation, you can see it under the events heading here. And you can do multiple events. So I could have this play when it gets clicked, or when the page gets clicked, or when it gets rolled over. And you can stack these on top of each other. So I could have all of these operative. So let me just preview that and show you what that looks like. So I only applied that to the third check mark. Let's see if I roll over it. There it is. And if I click the screen, it plays also. Let me go back there and just deselect these. Okay, I'll leave on page load. Now I can also trigger these by way of a button. There's a couple of different ways to do that. Let me show you one super easy way. So I'm going to select all of these, and I'll click the create trigger button. And it gives me this target icon. And then all I have to do is select this object, and bam, I have a button that plays these 3 animations. And again, they're in a weird order because they're in the order that I selected them, which was not 1, 2, 3. And I can just rearrange them in the panel. And there's corresponding timing in here. What I'm effectively doing is changing the timing. While I'm in here, why don't I select all these and show you that we can link these together and have them play all at once. So we can change that. So now if I preview this, it should play them 1, 2, 3. And then when I click the replay button, it does all of them at once because they're linked together for the timing panel. So the timing panel, shows these different options. So right now, this on release is the only event option because I'm selecting the button. If I deselect the button, suddenly page load is my option. So you can see there's different timing based on what is triggering the event. Simple to look at, but under the hood, there's some power in here and there's some complexity. And InDesign is just responding to what I have selected in terms of what it's doing. Let me go back to the buttons and forms panel, and I'm going to get rid of all this stuff and just show you what it takes to create this from scratch. So I'm going to delete each of these actions. Actually, let me just, let me convert this to an object, all right? So this is just artwork right now. This is a rectangle with rounded corners, and I've got text inside, and I want to make it into a button. So I'll select it, and there is a convert to button option here. There is a drop-down menu, and I can choose button, and that will make it into a button, right? And so now I have a button. Let me undo, and I'll show you another one of my favorite options, which is I can simply add an action to this, and InDesign knows if I'm adding an action that it needs to become a button. So I will add animation, and boom, it's a button. Now, like I said, I recommend naming everything. So I would just call this like replay button, and then I can go in and add more of these actions. So because I didn't have all of them selected and use that trigger button from the animation panel, I have to go in and add these manually. So I'll add 3 animations, and it's adding check 3 by default, but I can go in and change which one this refers to. And you'll note there are more options than just to play these. Button can stop animation, it can pause it, it can resume it after it's been paused. It can reverse it, or it can stop every animation that's playing on screen. Additionally, with the buttons, you can create multiple states. So for example, let's create a rollover state. The way to do that is just to click on the rollover. And this is essentially what we'll be seeing in a little bit in the multi-state objects, where just click and it changes the appearance. You're not seeing it now, but if I were to go in and change the color of this, let's just make it green, then you're really going to see this button change color. I'll go back to the normal state just for my sanity as I'm working with this InDesign document. I know that it should look like that by default. So let me go to the preview panel and play the preview. And now you can see when I roll over the button, it changes the state. And I'll click it, and now it plays them one at a time through, just like we set up in the buttons and forms panel. Check 1, check 2, check 3. Now inside the animation panel, we just set up the default animation, but we can change the duration if we want to have this play faster. We can have each one of these play multiple times or loop infinitely. In the timing panel, we can if we create a sequence by linking them, we can add looping within here. I think I have to select both of them. Yep. And then I can loop it or tell it to play a certain number of times. So there's a lot of hidden sophistication in here, as you'll probably keep hearing me say over and over. And in addition to the presets, which are useful, we can customize aspects. So there are presets that rotate, but what if we want to start with a preset and add rotation? Well, we can set an angle. We can tell it we want to spin from the center, or we want to spin from the top left or the bottom right. And we can change how it animates relative to its appearance. So it could start at the current appearance, or it could end at the current appearance. There are presets that scale, but we can also adjust the scaling here. We can adjust the opacity, make it a fade in, fade out, or not at all. And we can hide something until it's animated, or hide it after it's animated. And just to give you a look, most of the time I don't deviate from these presets much because they cover most everything. I get a lot of mileage out of just flying in from the left or flying in from the top. So that fades in and slides in. There's grow, there's moving, rotating. So usually I start with one of these and I just adjust the timing and make sure everything looks good in the preview and I'm ready to roll. So that's the nuts and bolts of a really simple animation. Let's take a look at a slightly more complicated one. So this is the one I mentioned where I'm trying to emulate what the designer of the USC annual report was doing. And the goal is basically to have these dots, these circles, come from the center of this line outward as the line grows at the same time. And so this is really hard without a timeline, right? Because normally if you're doing timeline animation, you can say, well, at frame 0, it's going to start here. And then, at frame 10, it's going to end up here, and I can move between those. So how do we approximate that with this type of animation? It turns out the InDesign engineers thought of this as well. And they have this option down here, which is show animation proxy. And what that does is tell you, where the animation is going to start or end, depending on this animate setting you have. And it gives you an idea of where that either first or last frame is in space. And so you can see that my gray rectangle is here, which is not exactly what I want. So I can adjust that manually. The way I adjust it is to mess with the motion path. How do you get a motion path in the first place? Well, there's a couple ways to do it. You can draw a line. Let me see if I can do this without screwing up here. So I'll create a path, and I think I haven't done this in so long, so my apologies if I get this wrong. I think I cut that, and I select this. Oh, no. Did I select both of these? Yeah, so I select my path and my animated thing, and I say convert to motion path. And so now that has become my motion path. And hopefully you can see that. Let me zoom in. There is a green line here. And the little dots essentially indicate the keyframes of the animation. All right, so that's how I do a super complicated one. Most of the time, I don't need that, and I don't want to spend that much time on it. So often what I do, let me just remove this animation completely, just hit the trash can, that gets rid of all animation on there, is I will do something like flying from the left. And so that gives me a starting motion path to work with, and then I can select that with my selection tool. Once I have it selected, which I need the selection tool to do, I can get my subselection tool, my direct selection tool. And then I can grab a point and I can move that point around. See, I can move it on this line and select my animation again with my selection tool. And then I can see where my animation proxy is. So that's pretty close, but not quite. So I'm going to try and select this motion path. And then I'm switching, I hit the A key to switch to my direct selection tool. And I'll just keep adjusting that, probably like right in the center there. And then I'll get my direct selection tool again and select that. And that's about where I want it to be. And so I can play around with that and then preview it. Now I want these all to happen at the same time. So this is my one on the bottom. This is my line. You can see I have these, this line indicates these are all linked together. And I want them all to be linked together. So let me link them again. And we'll just preview. I don't think this is going to look good, but the first time I did this, I had to do a lot of trial and error to get this. And so you can see there is something, this does appear to be, the path is good. And so I just need to work on the timing. So I'll spare you, going back and forth, but you can see that under the hood, there's this hidden power with being able to manipulate these motion paths and to use this this animation proxy feature to see where your animation will start or end depending on what settings you have in there. So that's how you'd go about creating a more sophisticated animation in InDesign. Another thing I'll mention is that you can import animation from elsewhere. So if you've created animation in Tumult Hype or Adobe Animate, they can export a format called OAM. And OAM can be placed directly into InDesign. So if you go to File, choose Place, and find an OAM file, it will create a container. And that container then, when you export from the 3 formats we're talking about over these 2 days, it will work in your layout. So while you can, get more sophisticated than it initially seems on the surface in InDesign, at some point there's no substitute for an animation tool. And so if you find you need to use one, or if you're working with an animator who's creating something very sophisticated for, say, you're making a publication, right, and you're not focused on the animation, you can always import their work into your document and export it digitally. So that's something else to think about when it comes to animation. All right, so let's get into multi-state objects. So here I have a multi-state object. And as I mentioned, it's controlled by the object states panel. So again, I've named these. I've named the object something that I can recognize, and you'll see why in a minute. And each one of these states I've named clearly. Now, when I click on them in the object states panel, it actually changes the appearance. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see the doctor's name is changing. This icon over here is changing. And this icon, if I double click, I can get into it. It has animation on it. And if we go to the animation or timing panel, you can see because it is in an object state, instead of saying on page load, it has on state load. And I didn't have to change anything. That's just what the default becomes when you're creating an animation inside an object state. So that's what you saw in this document when I clicked on one of these doctors, and you see this animating in, it's being triggered by the object state. And so that's how that's done. It wasn't any more work. It's just that I happened to create it inside a multi-state object. So, working with these can be a little clumsy because you don't know what state you're on. And if your state is empty to start with, it can be hard to locate on screen. Let me start by, let's just create a super simple object, a multi-state object, so you can see that to begin with. I'll do it off the edge of the pasteboard here. And I'll do what I always do as a developer who's testing is I'm just going to create a really beautiful, colorful rectangle. And there's a couple different ways to do this. So you can start with your first state. And when you click the plus button in the object states panel, it'll create a second state automatically. And I have this selected, and in the second state, if I select it and change the color, I'm just waiting for some of the zoom stuff to move so I can get to my panel there. I'll change the color to orange so we have a nice bright contrast. Now I have 2 different states. Okay, so what if I have the states to begin with and I don't want to create it from a single state? Let me trash this. And so now I've just got it just left me with my first state. Let's say I want to create my states first. So I'm just going to make a copy. And normally you might have them like stacked up on top of each other. So, you have this consistency of appearance. But I'm going to offset them just so we can see them as we're working with them. So I'll make this one that orange color. Now I have my 2 states. And if I select I have what I want to become my 2 states. These are just 2 rectangles. If I select these and I just click the new state, it will create 2 different states for me. And not necessarily in the order I intended, so I can move them around if I want and rename them. Now, let's undo those steps. And you'll notice that it also gives me some handy dandy instructions in the object states panel. If I option click, then it will create this in a single state. So now I have two states with both of these objects, in which might be what I want some of the time. Another way to get that same result is to take these two items, if I want them to be in the same state, is to group them. So I'll just hit Command G, be Control G on your Windows machine. And then when I create a new one, it has both of them in a single state and it duplicates that state. So that is, let me just trash all this. That is all I've done here is I created the initial artwork, text frame. I made this object with animation on it, and I just kept adjusting it. I created the 5 states and I adjusted it. Now, the way these states are getting triggered are these buttons on the top. So if I select one of these, you can see how it's set up. I did it the same way I showed you a moment ago, where I just opened the buttons and forms panel and hit the plus sign for an action. But this time I chose the go to state option. So you can see there's 3 different options for MSOs. You can say go to next state, you can go to previous state, or you can go to a specific state. And that's exactly what I wanted. So when that shows up, I select an object, and InDesign is being a little bit quirky right now. Let's say somehow I lost the name here. Why don't I update this? This was, let's just call it docs, all right? Because those are my doctors. Now when I select this button, there we go, the object docs is selected. And this one goes to doc 1. If I select the second doctor, this goes to doc 2, etc. And so that's how those are triggering that state. Now, I had mentioned previously that I have this menu down at the bottom right. This is on the master page, right? So I don't have to add it to every single page. So let me go in here and show you how this is working. This is my button. If I go to buttons and forms, you can see this particular button, there's a little trick here, is this is an invisible button sitting on top of another one. This one goes to state. Oh, sorry. This one doesn't, I've just made it more complicated. This one is simpler. You can have sophisticated menus that have a button on top of a button. This just happens, I just created this larger button out of ease for myself and making it easier for the user to click it so they didn't have to hit the circle. So I've made it a little bit bigger so it's easier to actually hit. But there are different kinds of menus that you can create, and we'll look at some of those tomorrow, where you can actually have 2 different buttons. So that you might have an open and a close button, and they might have different appearances, or they might have the same appearance but different behavior. And so in that case, when I click this button, it might hide itself, right? So that's one of the actions is I can show or hide buttons. Or it could be a multi-state object, and inside state 1, there's an open button. Inside state 2, there's a close button. In this case, this one is much simpler. It just goes to a particular state. The object that it's targeting is the compact menu. So if I can locate this compact menu, I think it's this little rectangle here. So this is what I was talking about with an empty state. This empty state is just a little rectangle. And you can see that this state, even though it's basically empty, there is also an open state that has the entire menu in it. Now inside of it, this menu has buttons that are all linked. So if I go to the buttons and forms panel, they go to a specific destination. They're jumping to a bookmark in this document. All those bookmarks were just created when I created that table of contents, the thing we did right at the start. So I have access to those there. Going back to that closed state, I just want to mention strategically, why this little tiny rectangle is sitting off the page is I don't want it to block anything here. So if I had a button that was sitting under the menu or something, I don't want this rectangle getting in the way and eating up clicks that need to be going to something underneath. And so that's why I tend to make my empty states. They're tiny little rectangles with no stroke or fill, and I try and move them out of the way. So in this case, I literally moved it off the page. And that's all it takes, to create that effect in our output. So this one is just going to the next state. And because there's only 2 states and one of them is, an empty appearance, it's just cycling between these as you're clicking on it. It's just a toggle. So this is a multi-state object. And, what we were looking at here with this info about the doctors is also a multi-state object. Now I will skip ahead. I'm going to skip the 3D flip cards and the slideshows. We will talk about those tomorrow. And I'm going to go to this page, and it looks like I had used this in a previous demo. So let me just get rid of that stuff on screen. All right, so this is a multi-state object, and this one functions a little bit more like a pop-up, but it's the same stuff working under the hood. This is a button. Somewhere there's a button. Oh, you know what? I think I took the actions off of those. So let's add them. Let's add them right back. I'll select this button. Oh no, there it is. I just have multiple objects in there. Okay, so this goes to the state contact info, the urgent care state, and the contact info object. And that's just what you expect, except the difference between this and the menu we're just looking at is that this has an empty state, but then it also has multiple states. So the menu had 2 states, open and closed. The doctor info had 5 states, but they all had content. And this multi-state object has an empty state and it has 3 states with content. So there is, total flexibility in terms of what you're creating and how it gets triggered by the user, the reader of your document. Similar things here with the nonlinear navigation. So if I drop into here, there's a lot of different ways to do this, by the way, depending on the format. And this format works in all 3 of them, where you're this effect of using a multi-state object works in all 3 formats we're talking about. But with In5, you can also get rid of the navigation on screen. So if I go back here and we look at Publish Online, this navigation is always here. I always have thumbnails. Always know there's pages in between. But with In5, you can effectively, just by choosing options when you export, you can remove all that. So for your ease of use, for your sanity, instead of having a complicated multi-state object, if you want to create, complex navigational elements, you can actually have these jump to different pages. And if you've hidden, the back and next navigation, similar to what we were looking at, say, in this document, where there's no back and next button. There is a menu up here that allows you to go places. Oops, I just clicked the home button. And there's some guided navigation, but it doesn't have page thumbnails and that kind of stuff. So you have the flexibility to create nonlinear navigation by jumping to pages. So here are our object states, and this is the initial state, right? This is the choice. And then inside of that, there's a button. Let me switch to the buttons panel. You can see that this goes to the blue pill state. And here I've committed an egregious sin of not naming my object, so it just says multi-state 6. But that will take us to the blue state. And then, within there, we can do all different types of things. But if you, the point of this particular piece of interactivity, this example is you can change object states in certain ways that aren't even really perceptible to your user. So they could be selecting things, but it's altering the appearance in order to, make a better sales presentation of them by tailoring the information, or maybe you want to give them feedback, right? Maybe one thing is a wrong answer and a right answer, and you're taking them down a certain path. So this is just this is more food for thought in terms of techniques you can use with a multi-state object. And the last page in this is also this is in5 specific, so we will look at this tomorrow. Now, let's take a look at adding another page. There's one more thing that I wanted to mention. So we talked about video, and we talked about the table of contents. So let's revisit both of those. I'm going to go to the first page and create another page. I'm going to drag my master page onto it so it fits in. And then I'm going to Command Shift and give this a new page title. Let's call it YouTube Embed. And let's take a look at embedding content from a website. This is something we can do in all three of these formats. So let me go to the YouTube channel here, and this is just a quick teaser video. Let's just grab this since it's on top. And the way you embed content is you click the share button and choose the embed option. Now, this is something you can do with all kinds of different online content. You can do it with Google Maps. You can do it with Twitter feeds. But by far and away, I think the most common thing I see is YouTube and occasionally Vimeo. And so I'm just going to hit the copy button to copy this code. And then I'm going to deselect everything in InDesign. I probably don't need to do that, but that is habit for me. And I will go up to Object and say Insert HTML. And then I can paste this right in and say OK. And let me see if it gets it. This in these recent versions of InDesign has been a little buggy. So it doesn't re-render. So what I do is I go back up to Object, and normally I'd say Edit HTML, but it still says Insert. So let me deselect, reselect it, right click and say Edit HTML. Same HTML, I'm just going to click OK. And for some reason, InDesign should recognize that now and actually render it. There we go. So here's the YouTube embed, and I can line it up here. Of course, I could make a text frame over here and put some text in there. My text is white for some reason. We go into my paragraph styles. Oh, last was on the TOC line. Let's just make a body copy for now. Okay, so now let's see if that works in our output. And the quickest way to do that without actually doing the output is the ePub interactivity preview. So let me go there. I'll click play. It refreshes the page. And there is my YouTube video inside this document. This is going to work in all three formats that we mentioned. The one challenge you might think about with, or actually, I'll take this back. I don't know if this is going to work everywhere in an ePub. So it's going to work, if I tested it now on iBooks Reader on my desktop Mac, it will work. I don't know if it works in the iPad. So maybe a better option for Publish Online, or if you plan to crack open the ePub yourself, and it will work with in5 as well. Then, since I've added a page, let's go ahead and update the table of contents. And we are running short on real estate there, but let's try it. So because that's set up and because I have a new page and it uses that paragraph style that I have this configured to, all I have to do is say update table of contents. And there's my YouTube embed option. And I do have some overset text, so I could restyle this to make it all fit, but you get the idea there.
Justin,
Yes, Alan.
15 minutes.
Thank you very much. All right. Is that 15 minutes? We have questions after the 15 minutes or 15 minutes total?
15 minutes total.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, thank you for letting me know. Well, very quickly then, I'm going to show you these two export formats, and then I will quiet up and let you guys ask any questions. So, publish online. Oh man, and I still have yet to figure out how to get around the Zoom interface. So let me go to File and just find it here, Publish Online. It's also, there's a share button. Let me see if I can get to it right now. There's a share button right here, and I can publish online from here. So when I hit that, I'll get this menu, and basically I can just give it a name and export. There isn't really much I have to think about. There's some advanced options in terms of like a thumbnail and image quality, but basically I just hit publish. It's that easy, and it takes a few minutes to export and upload, and then this is the result that I get. And it just gives me this link, and I can send it to people. The ePub, which is what we looked at in iBooks here, that is similarly simple. That's under File, Export. And you just make sure to choose ePub Fix Layout. And let me, go ahead and save this. And, there's a bunch of options here, but, you probably don't have to think about it too much. You can create a navigation table of contents in there. You can attach CSS and JavaScript already. This is automatically attached because of the scrolling frame. So this is what is going to make your scrolling frame work, but you don't have to do that. The scrolling frames panel did that for you. So really, you just get in here and you click OK, exports to your desktop. And if it's configured by default to open a viewing app, it'll open it right up, and you'll get it in iBooks or whatever you got on Windows. So the exports for those formats are super simple. Most of the time is spent in InDesign, creating the interactivity, previewing it, making sure it works, and then you export. So that's the interactivity, at least for the first day. And I will let you guys ask some questions. Thanks so much for your patience.
There are questions in the chat. I've been copying names for the raffle, so I haven't gone through the chat.
Okay, let me stop sharing momentarily. It might be just easier for me to see all the questions. And I'll kind of I'll try and go reverse order here just because it's faster. What dimensions would you recommend for an online published PDF that will be legible both desktop and mobile, assuming we aren't doing the responsive layout? With the dimensions, so if you're basically, I assume what we're talking about with this is publish online. I knew this was going to happen. I want to go right back to sharing. Let me do that. Let me share. And I believe with publish online, if I shrink this down, it will shrink with it. So what you need to think about in terms of trying to make one layout that's going to work on all of them is to make the document big enough so that the quality isn't going to suffer going down. The challenge that you're going to have is if somebody is really looking at it on a phone, they might be in portrait mode, and this is not going to look great in portrait mode because there's going to be a bunch of empty space at the bottom because the width is going to be filled at the top, and then there's going to be empty height. So there's not great. My starting point is to think about kind of an iPad like a 1024 by 678. For desktop, wider tends to look better. So it's hard to balance those two, but you know, I would definitely try and figure out if there's a primary and lean toward that. But you can certainly make it bigger than your layout, and Publish Online will scale it down, or bigger than the device you're targeting. So if your target device is a phone, you might consider making it bigger. So when somebody looks at it on desktop, the quality is still good, but the relative dimensions, the ratio is going to look good on the phone if that's your target device. All right, so hopefully that helps. Pretty wishy-washy answer. Thank you, Tiago. Can you repeat how to re-render the YouTube video in InDesign? Yeah, so it's just an InDesign bug. Usually when you insert HTML, it doesn't work the first time. And so I right-click on the object and I choose Edit HTML. I don't update any of the code. I just click OK, wait a few seconds, and it renders properly. And it's just an InDesign bug. But if you make like you're editing the HTML and just click OK, it'll re-render it and it'll work. Can In5 remove the navigation arrows on ebook? Yes, you can design your own navigation, and you can create any variation you want. And we'll get into more of that tomorrow. But you can see it in the examples. Some have that nav bar at the bottom. Some have arrows. Some don't. You have total flexibility with that. Robin and Roxy, can you use the same empty state box multiple times, or do you may have to make a different one each time? If it's one object state, you only need one, or excuse me, it's one multi-state object, you only need one empty state. If you're creating multiple, then every multi-state object that you want to have an empty state has to have it. So again, let me try and share real quickly. And let me show you a tool just in case I forget to show you tomorrow. So this is an In5 specific tool, but you do not need a license to use it. So let me I'm just gonna find a multi-state object and select it. When you have In5 installed, even if you just have the free demo installed, which has no time limit, so this will keep working for you even if you don't license it. In the object states, this was such a pain and I did it so often, I added both to the menu and to right click, add empty state. So if for some reason we did not have this empty state and we just had these 3 different states, you could click the flyout menu or right click and say add empty state. It creates that for you. So if you find that as painful as I do, that little thing makes it easier, and that just comes with In5. You don't need a license, just install In5. So could you create animation After Effects and import into, it says IE, but I assume that's maybe ID InDesign. If you're creating After Effects animation, the 2 things I would look at would be video, which all the formats are going to support, or an image sequence, which In5 will support. You cannot do, it doesn't make an OAM, but After Effects doesn't make interactivity, so you might as well bring it in as a video or an image sequence. I don't think there's a list of all animations in the document. I only see in the animation panel when I click on one. Right, so the animation panel, the timing panel, the button panel, the object states panel, these are all context sensitive. So they're only showing based on what you've selected. The timing panel, if you have timing on the page, when you deselect everything, you'll see like the on-page load event and the on-page click event and the drop-down in the timing menu. But they're all context specific. You won't see them, you won't see options for elsewhere in the document, just right where you are, right where you have selected. It's one of my big, okay, Debbie saying, Shan, this is one of my big questions. I think we have to rethink how we work and make parallel versions without depending on multiple layouts, Liquid and InDesign. Okay, so just figure out an easy way to create a print version. Okay, yes, so somebody says In5 allows a PDF download. Yes, In5 and Publish Online both have PDF download options and that bar at the bottom. Yeah, so Debbie, I hope you will, Debbie and Shannon, I hope you come tomorrow, and we'll talk about, you know, liquid layout and multiple layouts and how to do that kind of stuff. It's too deep a topic to get into right now. Yeah, so people are asking about a print version. So yeah, with the case of definitely in5, I think if I'm remembering correctly, when you do publish online, go ahead and share my screen again. I think the only option when you publish online is to export the PDF that, yeah, this document. So the download, if you choose to download the PDF, it lets you choose a preset. So you can only include this document. And so you have to think about how you're designing this document so it degrades gracefully so that your interactive elements become, you know, images that look like they make sense. In5, when you do, so okay, prepare to be overwhelmed. This is the full export dialog. We're going to get into this tomorrow. When you look at all the options here, you can go into the viewer display, which is that item at the bottom. If you include the PDF download and you don't do anything, it automatically includes this document as a PDF. It's pre-selected options that make sense. But if you don't like those options, or if you want to include a different document, say you've created a separate print document because you really have that much difference between your print document and your interactive document, you just click browse, find that print PDF and attach it here. And then that'll be available for download in the output. And let me see, I think Ren's document, no, Ren's doesn't have the PDF download. I don't know if anybody has the PDF download in the examples, but it appears right here in this menu bar at the bottom. So, so you have that option with those two formats, and those are the differences. Are completely standalone formats that work on computers. I know web apps, this is David Creamer, work on mobile devices, but I would like something better than fixed layout ePub for computers, especially Windows. Yes, if you ever hear David Blattner talk about this topic, this is one of his pet peeves. There isn't a good distributable format. PDF is great in terms of distribution, but like we talked about, doesn't have the interactivity. Fixed layout ePub is great if you know what device and reader the person has, but you know, like David says, it doesn't really work very well in Windows. There's not a default application like Mac has iBooks. Yeah, so personally, okay, so this may be where I'm biased because I sell a product that does this, but I like the link option in terms of universality better. So whether it's in5 or it's published online, sharing a link is universal. You don't have to worry about what reader the person has on any device. They can open it in their web browser just by a link. Document formats, they're just harder. That problem just isn't solved. And yeah, so that would be my best recommendation. Melissa says, can you have an animation nested within an MSO of a slideshow? Yeah, absolutely. So this might have been asked before we did that, but there was animation nested in the one with the doctors. And it was set to play on state load, but you can change the event too. It can be played by buttons or whatever other option you want. Jan Libby said, is there a way to not see the video controller when you export to iBook? No, so iBook and, I mean, this is just the area where you don't have control. iBook is choosing what that looks like. That's the case with, well, yes, to a certain extent, although for some reason in both iBook and Publish Online, they both had that weird thumbnail. I think that might just be a bug with Adobe, like exporting that film strip icon instead of the poster image, but the controllers look the same too. So maybe that's just a native controller on my Mac, but either way, yeah, no control over that, unfortunately. People are looking for the scrolling frame link that is in the chat pod many times. Thank you for everybody who repeated that in there. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to skip down to the most recent messages.
And this is about the last two,
Okay, I will try and pick. So Suzanne Montezer is asking about exporting to a SCORM package. No, but that is something I'm planning probably for this year. Certainly you can package it yourself, but I'm going to try and make that easier. Buttons. Oh yeah, somebody mentions buttons can perform more than one action. Yes, buttons can do like infinitely many actions. So that is a good tip. And somebody was asking about nesting animations within MSOs or a slideshow. If it's an MSO slideshow, yes, you can nest animations. You can nest just about anything in an MSO except an MSO. There is a workaround. If you remind me tomorrow, I can show you how to nest an MSO in an MSO, but it's a little wonky. But yeah, the cool thing about InDesign is when you get into nested content, it's just still InDesign. So just about everything you're doing on the root level on the page can be nested inside a group or on an MSO. I would caution you against nesting things in buttons, interactive things, because the button itself is going to absorb your clicks and your user interaction. So you don't want to put interactive stuff inside something that's already interactive. Yeah, so page transitions. None of the page transitions work in Publish Online. So we'll talk about page transitions for slideshows and different page formats like the flipbook and the website looking formats with In5 tomorrow.
which is a great stopping point because we're going to move on to tomorrow. Sorry to rush, but I have a commitment that I've made to folks to keep this to 2 hours. The subject requires probably a lot more. Justin, we should have made this 4 sessions rather than 2. No, I'm kidding.
I'll come back again, but 4 days in a row, my voice will not take it.
Right. Okay, we'll hold you that to coming again.
Sounds great.
So everybody, let's have a virtual clap or a real unmute yourselves, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am going to
Thank
run
you.
through
Thank
this,
you.
and if everybody will kind of like listen and kind of like really do this, we can do this quickly. Everybody unmute yourself if you're staying for the raffle. If you're staying for the raffle, once your name is called, you have 5 seconds to announce yourself. Well, mute yourself if you're not in a quiet space. You have 5 seconds to announce yourself and say you want the prize or you don't want the prize. Let's do that quickly so we can move on. If the person isn't here or you don't want the prize for some particular reason. I am going to share screen here. And okay, so tomorrow, session 2. Somebody's background is not quiet. If you're in a space that's not quiet, then go ahead and mute yourself. Okay, for 2, you can still register for 2 if you session 2. I'm putting the link to the to session 2 in the chat pod. So if you haven't already registered, there is the link. Moving on. Oh, wait a minute. That's me, feedback. I'm not quite sure why. In any case, next month, we're going to do 10 tips for Creative Cloud libraries. And here, Keith Gilbert is our presenter. And here in the chat pod is the link to that presentation. Here are our raffle prizes. There are 4 of them. And we're going to go from bottom up. And I have put everybody's name in the raffle wheel. And Debbie, you want text expander. Are you here?
I am here. Text expander?
Correct. Do you want it?
I don't know what it is.
We're gonna have to move on. You're gonna say yes.
Sure, sure,
You should
Okay,
take it. I
all
love
right.
it.
sure. Thank you. Sure. Yay, thank you very much.
Okay, here is some text expander. If you go to the website, it tells you more about it.
I'm sure.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. The next one is Suitcase Fusion 10 from Extensis.
Wow, that's delicious.
Albie, are you here? Okay, moving on. Elena, are you here? Do you
Me.
want Suitcase Fusion 10?
Yes, of course.
Okay, very good. All right. The next is our infrared digital thermometers. We don't really have time to talk about that. But this is a physical item. So if you want it, I need to have an address to send it to you. And if you are in the United States, no problem, we'll pick up the postage. If you're outside the United States, then I'm gonna ask you to pick up the postage. I'm gonna need a physical address, so you can email that to me privately. And I'm putting my email address in the chat pod. Okay, so first, Bill, are you here? Do you want it?
I am here.
Okay.
Which bill?
Oh, sorry.
I have a bill SAHM.
Not
Yeah,
me.
that's me.
Okay.
take it.
You'll take it. Okay, are you
Yes,
in the
sir.
US?
Yeah, I'm in Delaware.
Okay, good. Send me your address. And we have, I'm sorry, we have 2 of those, so I can do it again.
We got 2 of those and 2 bills.
Okay, I can't pronounce that. Kiyama.
Kiyama. It's Kiyama.
Do you want it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
and you're in the US.
Yes, I am. I'm in LA.
Oh, great. Okay. So you have my email address. I'm gonna move that. And then we're gonna move on to the next item. And this is any Marksware product. You have to choose and let me know which product you want. If you don't know today what you want, that's okay. Take a look and email, and then let me know which one you want.
Oh, okay. Which products were they again?
This is for the Marksware product. Okay, the person is Ajoy John. Are you here? Five seconds. Okay. Jason Roberts, Are you still here?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, you want it?
Yes.
Okay, all right, well, take a look and then let me know which one you want. And that is all of the raffles. There was a question when I was starting to do, or a comment when I was starting to do the marks where I think the person that got the second thermometer had a question. Or did I misunderstand what was going on? Okay, no problem. So tomorrow, session 2, we talk about N5, and next month we talk about Creative Cloud libraries. And I am done, and we're only 1 minute over. Sorry to rush through it.
Good job.
Good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Mr. Allen.
See you tomorrow.
Good night.
Thanks a lot, everyone. See you tomorrow.
We will see everyone tomorrow.